My mother hissed, "You're here to wash dishes," and shoved me toward the kitchen in front of everyone. Not nudged, not guided, shoved. Her palm landed flat between my shoulder blades, hard enough to knock my balance forward before I had even finished pulling out my chair. For half a second, my hand stayed on the back of it, like my body hadn't caught up with what my life already knew. Move, obey. Don't make it worse. "Ethan," she said through a smile that was meant for the room. "Not for me. Don't embarrass us." Behind her, 12 people sat around a rented mahogany dining table covered in pressed linen, silverware, champagne flutes, and little arrangements of white flowers my mother had probably approved 3 different times. Tiffany's future in-laws were there. The caterers were there. My father was there, staring down at his napkin like it had suddenly become important. And my sister Tiffany laughed softly. That polished, practiced laugh she used when something uncomfortable needed to disappear. Everyone saw it. Nobody said a word. So I let go of the chair. I lowered my head. I started walking toward the kitchen. My jaw locked so tightly it hurt. Then I heard it. A chair scraping against hardwood. Slow, deliberate. I stopped. When I turned around, my 84-year-old grandfather, Elliot Monroe, was standing with one hand wrapped around his cane, and the other pointed straight at my mother. His voice was calm. "Then I'll eat where he is." The room went so quiet I could hear the candles burning. "My name is Ethan Monroe. I am 27 years old. And until 11 weeks ago, I believed something so quietly and completely that I never thought to question it. I believed I was the family disappointment. Not abused, not mistreated, not some tragic case, just less impressive than everyone else, less polished, less useful to the version of the Monroe family my mother wanted people to see. I dropped out of college at 19 after panic attacks started making normal life feel like a physical sport I was losing. I wasn't failing because I was lazy. I wasn't stupid. I just ran out of whatever invisible fuel other people seemed to have. So I came home, got the job at a home goods store called Harbor & Home, and stayed. Over 5 years, I became the assistant operations supervisor. I handled inventory, trained new hires, fixed scheduling disasters, unloaded trucks when someone called out, and learned exactly how much quiet competence people ignore when it comes without a degree framed on the wall. I paid rent on a small apartment 20 minutes from my parents' house. I drove a 2016 Toyota Camry with a cracked passenger side mirror. I kept my bills paid, my head down, and my life simple. Clarissa Monroe, nee Bartlett, hated simple. She believed elegance was morality. The right schools, the right clothes, the right friends, the right last names. Tiffany, my younger sister, fit perfectly, 25, beautiful, marketing job downtown, engaged to Beckett Hargrove, whose family owned dealerships, land, and enough reputation to make my mother nearly levitate. Tiffany was the daughter Clarissa displayed. I was the son she explained away. The brunch was supposed to be the official meeting between our family and Beckett Hargrove's family before the engagement party the following month. That was how my mother described it in the group text. Anyway, an intimate pre-wedding family gathering, nothing formal, just both sides getting comfortable with each other. I was invited. That should have been my first warning. Clarissa did not invite me to things that mattered. I was useful for airport pickups, moving furniture, picking up forgotten prescriptions, fixing the Wi-Fi, carrying boxes from the garage. But birthdays, donor dinners, holiday photos, engagement events, those were for the version of the family she could show people without explanation. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. I wore my best light blue button-down, the one I had ironed twice because the collar never sat right. I polished my old brown shoes. I arrived at 10:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, because being late would have become evidence. My mother opened the door in a green blazer and pearl earrings, looked me over once, and gave me the kind of smile people give when they have already decided where you belong. "Good," she said. "You can help the caterers." I waited for her to laugh. She didn't. For the next 40 minutes, I carried ice buckets, lined up water glasses, moved folding chairs into the sunroom, and arranged fruit on platters I knew I would never eat from. Through the kitchen door, I could hear Tiffany's bright voice, Beckett's father talking about vineyards, my mother laughing like she had personally invented grace. I told myself she would call me out eventually. Then I stepped through the kitchen door with a smoked salmon platter in both hands and nearly ran into her. Her smile stayed perfect. Her eyes did not. She took the platter, set it on the sideboard. and placed one hand flat against my back. "Kitchen," she whispered. I froze. Then came the shove. "You're here to wash dishes. Don't embarrass us." My grandfather, Elliot Monroe, was not a loud man. He had never needed to be. Aye. Some people enter a room and demand attention. Grandpa Elliot simply occupied space in a way that made attention reorganize itself around him. He had built Monroe Holdings from a small regional real estate company into a name that appeared on office buildings, development signs, and charity plaques across 4 cities. He wore old suits, drove old cars, and owned rooms without raising his voice. Most of my life, he had been present but distant. Birthday checks, Christmas cards, a hand on my shoulder at Thanksgiving, questions about work that never lasted long enough to become conversations. I thought that was all he had to give me, but on that Saturday morning, after my mother shoved me toward the kitchen, like staff she was annoyed to manage, Grandpa Elliot stood up, slowly. His cane pressed into the hardwood, his left hand gripped the edge of the table. The sound of his chair scraping back seemed to cut through every polite lie in the room. Clarissa turned first. For 1 second, her face changed. Not much, just enough. The smile cracked at the corners. "Dad," she said lightly, "already trying to repair the room. Please sit down. Ethan is being sensitive. You know how he gets." Grandpa did not look at her like she was his daughter-in-law. He looked at her like she was evidence. I said enough. Clarissa. The way he said her name made every glass on that table feel breakable. No one moved. Not Tiffany, not Beckett, not my father. Then Grandpa turned to me, and his face softened in a way I had never seen directed at me before. "Ethan," he said, "lead the way." So I did. I walked back into the kitchen with my grandfather behind me, his cane tapping once for every step. We sat on mismatched stools at the counter while the dining room stayed frozen behind us. A caterer offered him salmon tartare. Grandpa looked at me. "Are there eggs?" I nodded. "Good," he said. "Make us breakfast." I made eggs because I didn't know what else to do. That is the part people don't understand about humiliation. When it has been practiced on you long enough, you don't always rage, you don't always break. Sometimes you just reach for a pan because someone older than you asked for eggs. And making eggs is easier than admitting your mother just shoved you in front of strangers. Grandpa sat at the kitchen counter with both hands folded over the top of his cane. He watched me crack 2 eggs into a bowl, watched me miss a piece of shell, watched me fish it out with fingers that were trying not to shake. For a while, neither of us spoke. From the dining room came the low, damaged murmur of people pretending they had not just witnessed something they would remember for years. I slid toast onto a plate, set the eggs beside it, put the plate in front of him. He picked up his fork, took 1 bite, and nodded like I had served him something from a 5-star kitchen. Then he said, "Why didn't you say anything?" I leaned against the counter. What would have been the point? He looked up. I tried to shrug, but it came out wrong. Too stiff, too tired. They don't listen. If I argue, I'm dramatic. If I leave, I'm ungrateful. If I stay quiet, at least it ends faster. Grandpa set his fork down. The room seemed smaller when he did that. "That," he said quietly, "is partly my fault." I stared at him. He looked older suddenly, not fragile, just worn down by something that had been following him for a long time. "I let Clarissa's ego run too long," he said. "I let your father explain too much away. I let distance become an excuse." "Grandpa, this brunch was a test." I didn't understand the sentence at first. "A test." He looked toward the swinging kitchen door. "I suggested it to your father. I told him both families should meet before the engagement party, and I told him you should be invited. The air changed. You set this up. I needed to see it plainly." He said, "Not through rumors, not through excuses, not through Gerald telling me I was misunderstanding his wife. I needed to see whether Clarissa would treat you like family in front of people she wanted to impress." He paused. "She treated you like staff." The kitchen door swung open so hard it hit the wall. Clarissa stood there, her face pale under perfect makeup, her hands clenched at her sides. Behind her, I could see Tiffany hovering in the hallway, eyes wide, not brave enough to enter and not decent enough to leave. "You are humiliating this family," Clarissa hissed. Grandpa picked up his coffee cup. "No," he said. "You did that." Her eyes snapped to me. "This is exactly what he does. He stands there looking wounded and makes everyone feel sorry for him." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because she had taken the only thing I had left, silence, and turned that into manipulation too. He dropped out, she said. He works retail. He lives in that little apartment and drives that embarrassing car. He does not belong at a table with the Hargroves. Grandpa's face didn't move. He is the only person near that table who has done an honest day's work without needing applause for it. Clarissa flinched like the words had crossed the room and struck her. You wouldn't speak to me like this if Grace were alive, she said. The name landed between us, Grace. I had heard it before, but only rarely. Always quickly, always with the door half closed. Grandpa stood again, slower this time, but no less certain. I am done letting you use my name to build a life you were never worthy of, he said. The trust, the shares, the lake house, all of it goes to Ethan. My hand went flat against the counter. Clarissa stopped breathing. You can't. I already began the process, he said. Today was only the final confirmation. She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in her eyes stronger than disgust. Fear. Grandpa turned back to his plate. Consider this your final audition. Clarissa, she left without another word. The door swung shut behind her. I stayed frozen, my palm pressed to the counter, trying to understand how a room I had been shoved out of had somehow become the place where everything changed. Grandpa's phone buzzed on the counter before I could ask what he meant by Grace. He looked at the screen, and something hard passed across his face. Speak of the devil, he said. Then he answered on speaker. Clarissa's voice filled the kitchen, like she had been screaming before the call even connected. Do you have any idea what you just cost us? Beckett's parents saw everything. Tiffany is crying. Gerald is furious. You humiliated me in my own home. Grandpa's voice stayed flat. You humiliated yourself. That boy doesn't even belong here, she snapped. He never did. He isn't even Grandpa, ended the call. The silence afterward was worse than the yelling. I stood there with one hand still on the counter, staring at his phone. What did she mean? He closed his eyes for a second, and I knew, before he said anything, that my life was about to split into before and after. Tell me, I said. Grandpa rubbed his thumb over the handle of his cane. Clarissa is not your biological mother. The words were simple, almost too simple for the damage they did. I didn't move. She married your father when you were not quite two, he continued. Your mother, your real mother, was Grace Monroe. My daughter, Grace. The name opened somewhere inside me like a locked room. She died when you were very young, he said. Ovarian cancer, aggressive, fast. She was 31. I looked down because looking at him felt impossible. She loved you, he said, and his voice changed on that word. Ethan, she loved you more than anything. I swallowed, but my throat didn't work right. Grandpa kept going, carefully now, like every sentence had glass in it. Clarissa never wanted to raise you. She wanted Gerald. She wanted the Monroe name. She wanted the life attached to it. But you were part of the package, and getting rid of you would have cost her too much. So she kept me, not because she loved me, because I was inconvenient to lose. Grandpa reached into his jacket and placed a thick cream-colored envelope on the counter. My name was written across the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. Grace had a younger sister, he said. Your aunt, Ruth. I stared at the envelope. She tried to reach you for years. Letters, birthday cards, Christmas gifts. Clarissa intercepted all of it. My chest tightened so hard, I almost stepped back. All of it. All of it. Where's she now? Grandpa pushed himself up with his cane and walked slowly to the back door of the kitchen. He opened it. A woman stood outside, around 60. Auburn hair streaked with silver, one hand pressed nervously against her coat. Her eyes were shaped exactly like mine. She looked at me like she had been waiting 25 years to breathe. Hi, Ethan, she whispered, and I broke. Ruth and I didn't speak at first. There are some moments language is too small for. She stepped into the kitchen like she was afraid sudden movement would scare me away, and I stood there like a grown man who had forgotten what his own hands were for. Then she opened her arms. I walked into them. The sound she made against my shoulder was not quite a sob. It was closer to relief, a breath held for decades finally leaving the body. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't collapse. I just stood there with my face turned toward the collar of a woman who smelled faintly like rain and cinnamon gum, and my chest shook in a way I could not stop. I tried, she whispered. I tried so many times. I didn't know. I said, I know, behind us. Grandpa sat back down at the counter, suddenly looking every one of his 84 years. That was when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I looked. We need to talk before your grandfather signs anything. There's something about the will. He doesn't know yet. Someone has been watching this family longer than you think. I read it once, then again. The warmth Ruth had just brought into the room turned cold at the edges. I placed the phone on the counter and turned it so Grandpa and Ruth could see. Grandpa's expression tightened. Who would send that? I asked. Ruth looked at him before she answered me. Clarissa has been managing more than letters. Ethan, my stomach dropped. What does that mean? Ruth reached for her bag, but her hand paused on the strap. There are documents, she said carefully. Filings, trust amendments, estate papers your father may not fully understand. Grandpa's jaw flexed. I knew she was hiding things, he said. I didn't know how far it went. Ruth looked at me with the kind of sadness that felt practiced. I've been working with an attorney, quietly, she said, for months. The phone buzzed again. Ask about the adoption papers. I stared at the screen. I was never adopted, I said. Ruth's face told me she already knew. 6 days after the brunch, I sat in an office on the 7th floor of a building downtown, with Ruth on my right and my grandfather's signed authorization in a folder on the desk. The attorney's name was Margaret Cho. She was 46, wore wire-rimmed glasses, and spoke with the calm precision of someone who had watched enough families destroy each other over money to no longer be surprised by the creativity of greed. I'm going to explain this plainly, she said. After your mother Grace died, your father established a secondary trust for you. My hands were folded in my lap. For me, for you, Margaret said. It was intended to transfer directly when you turned 25. I was 27. Nothing had transferred. Margaret slid a document across the desk. The trust never triggered because an amendment was filed in 2013. That amendment changed the distribution terms and cited a court-certified adoption record naming Clarissa Monroe as your legal adoptive mother. I looked at Ruth. She shook her head once. You were never adopted, Margaret said. The sentence should have felt obvious. Instead, it felt like standing on a floor and hearing someone explain there had been no foundation under it the whole time. Margaret placed another paper beside the first. This is the consent document supposedly signed by your father. This is an authenticated signature sample from the same year. I stared at both. Even I could see the difference. The notary seal was real, Margaret continued. It belonged to Patricia Duval, who later retired and died in 2018. But the filing date creates problems, and the signature has already raised serious concerns with the forensic examiner we retained. Ruth's hand moved slightly toward mine, then stopped, like she was giving me the choice. I took it. Margaret's voice softened, but only a little. If the adoption record is fraudulent, then the trust amendment is invalid. You were 14 at the time. Any legitimate change affecting your rights would have required proper notice, and, depending on the petition, your consent or court review, that clearly never happened. How much I asked. The question came out rougher than I intended. Margaret opened another folder. At your 25th birthday, approximately $340,000, with accrued interest and investment growth, closer to $480,000 now. The number did not feel like money, it felt like years. Rent checks, overdraft fees, secondhand furniture, saying no to dental work because the estimate made my hands sweat. I looked at the documents again, so Clarissa forged my father's signature. Preliminarily, Margaret said, that is what the evidence suggests. To take money meant for me. To redirect control of assets meant for you, she corrected. The distinction matters legally, emotionally. I imagine it does not. For the first time all morning, I almost smiled. Then Margaret turned another page. We also believe the anonymous text came from Patricia Duval's daughter. She found records in her mother's retirement files and realized something was wrong. Ruth squeezed my hand once. I looked at the fake adoption record. My name was there. My life was there. And somehow, I was only just being introduced to it. My father came to Margaret Cho's office the following Tuesday. Gerald Monroe looked smaller than I remembered, not physically. He was still broad-shouldered, still wearing the navy blazer Clarissa always said made him look trustworthy, still carrying himself like a man who had spent decades letting other people call him reasonable. But something about him had folded inward. He sat across from me at the conference table and did not ask if I was okay. Margaret explained everything in order. The secondary trust Grace's estate had helped establish for me. The amendment filed in 2013. The fake adoption record. The consent document with his alleged signature. The financial value of what had never been transferred. Ruth sat beside me. Grandpa sat near the window, both hands on his cane, saying nothing. My father listened without interrupting. When Margaret finished, the room went quiet. I waited. I don't know what I expected. Anger, maybe, horror, some delayed fatherly instinct finally waking up in him after 25 years. Instead, he looked down at the polished table and said, I need to call my own attorney. Not, Ethan, I'm sorry. Not, I should have protected you. Not even, I didn't know, just logistics. The grief that hit me then was different from anything Clarissa had ever done. Her cruelty had always been sharp enough to name. This was emptier, quieter. A door I had spent my whole life standing outside of, finally opening to reveal there had never been anyone on the other side. I looked at him. Did you know his jaw tightened? Not about this. That answer told me everything. Not about this, but about enough. He had known I was left out, known I was treated differently, known I disappeared from family photos, dinners, holidays, conversations. He had known something was wrong and chosen the comfort of not investigating. I had spent my life waiting for my father to teach me how to be a man. Instead, he taught me how a man can vanish while still sitting at the table. He left before I did, in the parking garage. I cried in Ruth's car with both hands over my face. She didn't tell me it would be okay. She just stayed. The formal forensic report came back on a Wednesday morning. Margaret called me at 8:12 a.m. while I was sitting in my car outside Harbor and Home, staring at the loading dock and trying to remember how to be a person who just went to work. The examiner finished, she said. His name was Dr. Thomas Birch. 30 years in question document examination, certified, experienced, and according to Margaret, extremely careful with language. Careful language still has teeth. The signature on the consent document did not match Gerald Monroe's authenticated signatures from the same period. The pressure pattern was wrong. The slant was inconsistent. Several letter formations showed hesitation markers that were not present in my father's normal writing. Dr. Birch's professional opinion was that the probability of the signature being genuine was less than 2%. Less than 2%. I sat with that number for a while. It was strange how something so clinical could feel so personal. My whole life had been full of people telling me I was overreacting, misremembering, misunderstanding. And now a man I had never met had looked at ink on paper and said, no, something happened here. Margaret filed the probate complaint the next day. By Monday, Detective Raymond Ashford from the County Financial Crimes Unit called and asked if I was available to give a formal statement. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The interview room had pale green walls, a camera in the corner, and a table that wobbled every time I shifted my elbows. Detective Ashford was methodical. He didn't comfort me. He didn't perform outrage. He asked dates, names, addresses, memories. He asked about Clarissa's control over the mail, family documents, access to my father's office. I answered everything I could. When I left, he said, keep your phone on. Clarissa was served notice of the probate filing that Thursday evening. Tiffany called me at 9:47 p.m. It was the first time my sister had called in months. What did you do? She asked. Her voice was shaking, but not with concern for me. I didn't do anything, I said. I just stopped letting things happen to me. Silence. Then, softer. Mom said there was some legal issue years ago. Something about paperwork. I didn't know it was this. Did you ask? Another silence. That was the answer. Tiffany had built her beautiful life in rooms I was not allowed to enter, and she had never wondered who kept closing the door. I hope the wedding is beautiful, I said. I meant it. But I also meant the next part. I can't pretend none of this happened. She hung up without saying goodbye. I placed the phone face down and sat in the dark. Realizing betrayal does not always arrive as cruelty. Sometimes it arrives as comfort. Sometimes it is simply someone choosing not to look because looking might cost them something. The probate hearing was in February. By then, I had been seeing a therapist for 6 weeks. Her name was Dr. Simone Adame, and in our 4th session, she said something I wrote on a receipt and kept folded in my wallet. You are not reacting only to what is happening now. You are healing from what happened then. I thought about that sentence while sitting at the petitioner's table with Margaret Cho on my left and Ruth on my right. Clarissa arrived 10 minutes before the hearing began. Cream suit, pearl earrings, perfect hair, perfect posture, the same polished face she had worn at every dinner, charity event, and holiday photo, where I had been placed near the edge or left out completely. She did not look at me. Her attorney, Howard Sellis, looked expensive and bored, which I assumed was part of what she had paid for. Judge Diana Ye entered at 10:03 a.m., and the room stood. The hearing lasted almost 4 hours. Margaret presented everything cleanly, the original trust language, the 2013 amendment, the alleged adoption record, the consent document, the notary timeline, and Dr. Thomas Birch's forensic report showing the signature was almost certainly not my father's. Howard Sellis objected several times. Judge Ye overruled him every time, not dramatically, not angrily, just with the brisk, practiced efficiency of someone who had seen fraud dressed in nice clothes before and was not impressed by the tailoring. At 3:47 p.m., she ruled that the 2013 Trust Amendment was invalid because it had been entered on the basis of a fraudulent petition. The trust would be restored to its original terms. Then she referred the matter to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges. No one gasped. No music swelled. There was just the clean sound of consequence finally arriving. Clarissa stared straight ahead. I looked down at my hands on the table and realized they were steady. For the first time, the truth did not need me to prove it alone. Clarissa was charged in April. Forgery, fraud upon the court, theft by deception. Margaret called me with the official update on a Friday afternoon, while I was standing in aisle 7 at Harbor and Home, holding a damaged lampshade and trying to decide whether it could be discounted or needed to be written off completely. For a second, I just stood there. A customer walked past me with a cart full of throw pillows. Somewhere near the front, a register beeped. Life kept making its small, ordinary noises around the sentence I had waited years to hear without knowing I was waiting for it. "She's been charged," Margaret said. I expected relief. I expected satisfaction. Maybe even the clean, sharp pleasure of justice. What I felt was tired. Not disappointed, not guilty, just tired in a deep, specific way, like my body had been carrying a weight for so long that putting it down hurt almost as much as holding it. My father filed for divorce in March. I found out through Margaret, not from him. His attorney contacted her to confirm Gerald would not contest the probate ruling or the restoration of the trust. That was the extent of our communication. No apology, no explanation. No father-son conversation where he finally looked me in the eye and named what he had allowed. Just legal cooperation. I'm still deciding what to do with that. Dr. Adamy says I do not have to make permanent emotional decisions while I am still bleeding from temporary revelations. I am trying to believe her. Grandpa Elliot finalized the transfer of the lake house, his Monroe Holdings shares, and the remaining trust provisions over the next few weeks. It involved paperwork, signatures, 2 meetings, 1 very patient notary, and me personally checking every credential twice. Grandpa noticed. He smiled a little. "Good," he said. "Trust, but verify." By the end of it, things that had once existed around me, but never for me, were legally mine. And still, I did not feel powerful. I felt quiet. Like someone had finally opened a locked room in my life and found a younger version of me still sitting there, waiting to be told he could come out. The lake house was smaller than I expected. I don't know why I had imagined something grand. Maybe because Clarissa had taught me that anything connected to the Monroe name had to announce itself before it entered a room. But the house in northern Georgia did not announce anything. It sat quietly near the water with wood-paneled walls, a porch that needed sanding, and a kitchen full of afternoon light, the kind of place built for people who actually intended to live there, not impress anyone. I stood in that kitchen for a long time. The following weekend, Ruth came with groceries, curtains, and a confidence in domestic tasks that I absolutely did not share. We burned the first pan of onions. She laughed. I almost didn't know what to do with the sound. After dinner, we sat on the porch while the lake went dark, and Ruth told me about Grace, not as a tragedy, as a person. Her terrible handwriting, her habit of ordering too much food and pretending it was for the table. The summer she learned to sail and capsized 4 times in one afternoon, then laughed so hard she cried. I listened to every detail like it was evidence, proof that before I was unwanted, I had been loved, proof that my mother had been real and mine. Grandpa Elliot died in June. Peacefully, Ruth said, though I have learned that peaceful does not mean painless for the people left standing in the room. He declined faster after the brunch, like some part of him had been waiting to finish one final piece of business before letting go. Ruth was there. I was there. His hand felt light in mine, near the end. He opened his eyes and looked at me. "You never needed any of this to be enough," he said. "I just wanted you to have it anyway." I know. I whispered. Thank you. He closed his eyes. He did not open them again. It is September now. I still work at Harbor and Home 3 days a week, but not the way I used to. Officially, I am a consulting operations lead, which sounds more impressive than standing in the back office with a barcode scanner explaining why the inventory system has been broken for 2 years. Unofficially, I'm doing the same thing I always did, noticing what other people overlook. The difference is that now, when I speak, people listen. They are implementing the stockroom system I suggested back when I was still being told I should be grateful for steady hours and dental insurance. It turns out 5 years of quiet, unglamorous work teaches you things that matter, if anyone bothers to value them. My apartment is still the same one. Same thin walls, same kitchen drawer that sticks if you pull it too fast, same view of the parking lot and the laundromat sign that flickers when it rains. I have not moved into the lake house yet. People seem surprised by that, like receiving property should instantly make you ready to become a new person. But I am learning that healing does not work like a legal transfer. A judge can restore a trust in one afternoon. A signature can move a deed from one name to another. A nervous system takes longer. I go to the lake house on weekends. At first, I only stayed for a few hours, then one night, then 2. Ruth says I don't have to rush making it home, and I think that is why it is slowly starting to feel like one. Ruth texts me every morning. Sometimes it is just morning, kiddo. Sometimes it is a picture of toast she burned, or a flower she saw on her walk, or something she remembered about Grace. Once, she texted me that my mother used to sing badly in the car and then get offended when anyone noticed she was off-key. I save that message. I save all of them. There is still so much about Grace I do not know, and sometimes the not knowing feels like grief with no object. But Ruth gives me pieces. Small ones, human ones, the kind Clarissa could not polish into usefulness, and therefore never understood. I had lunch with Tiffany last month. She is still marrying Beckett. I think he may actually be decent, which is one of the stranger comforts in all of this. We sat across from each other at a restaurant neither of us really liked, and talked awkwardly for 20 minutes before she said Grace's name. Not Mom, Grace. Then she cried. I let her. I do not know what my relationship with Tiffany becomes from here. I do not know if trust can grow in soil that was ignored for that long, but she is still my sister, and I am trying to learn the difference between having boundaries and becoming cruel. My father has called twice. I answered once. The conversation was short, careful, and mostly useless. He said he was sorry for how things turned out, which is not the same as being sorry for what he allowed. I did not correct him. I also did not comfort him. That felt like progress. Every Thursday, I see Dr. Adame. We are working through what she calls the archaeology of self-worth, digging through the layers of things I was told about myself, and asking which ones were ever true. Lazy, difficult, ungrateful, too sensitive. Not enough. Some days, I still hear Clarissa's voice before I hear my own. Some days, I stand in my apartment holding a glass of water and remember her hand between my shoulder blades. The shove. The heat of 12 silent people watching me disappear. But memory is changing shape, because now that scene does not end with me walking into the kitchen alone. It ends with a chair scraping across hardwood. It ends with an old man standing. Patricia Duval's daughter wrote me back after I sent the thank you letter Margaret helped forward. Her reply was only a few lines. She said she found the files in a box after her mother died, and something about them felt wrong. She said she almost threw them away twice. Then she wrote, "Your mother, Grace, was the kindest client my mother ever had." I thought someone should know. I read that sentence until I memorized it. Then I folded the letter and placed it with Ruth's cards, Grace's photographs, and the envelope Clarissa never wanted me to open. Grandpa's cane is in the corner of my living room now. Plain wood, rubber tip, nothing decorative about it. I did not ask for it. Ruth said he would have wanted me to keep it, so I did. Sometimes I look at it and think about that brunch. The table, the silence, my mother's hand, my father's eyes lowered to his napkin, Tiffany's polished laugh cracking at the edges. And then Grandpa Elliot Monroe, 84 years old, standing in a room full of people who had spent decades staying seated. He looked at me like I was already worth defending, not because I had achieved enough, not because I had become impressive enough, not because I had finally made the Monroe name useful, just because I was there, because I had survived, because I had stayed kind in a family that mistook kindness for weakness and silence for permission. I'm still learning how to live inside that feeling, being chosen. Some mornings, it feels too large for me. Some mornings, I still expect someone to take it back, but then Ruth texts, or the lake catches the light, or I pass Grandpa's cane on my way to work and remember the sound of that chair against the floor, slow, deliberate, certain, and I remind myself that I am not waiting outside the room anymore. I am already inside. The seat was always mine.